There was a belief that a woman who couldn't have children after 3 years of marriage was useless. This idea is out of touch with modern society. It's a backward way of thinking. Sadly, there are still those who carry the assumption that all women can and will become pregnant and give birth. And there are those who label women who can't as useless. My name is Ashley. I'm a 25-year-old housewife. I am unable to conceive. I have been weak and sickly since childhood with little physical strength. I often missed school. I didn't play with friends much, so I was shy. I had pale skin, was very thin, and didn't talk much. My parents considered me a defective product and despised me. They wished I would die sooner because I was a burden. All their love went to my older sister, Emily, who was 1 year older than me. Emily was healthy, unlike me. She had beautiful rosy cheeks and big, lovely eyes. I also had big eyes, but my thinness made them look sickly. My wealthy parents focused all their attention on pampering Emily. They bought her anything she wanted. I was left behind on family trips due to my illness. Hired housekeepers and nurses mechanically took care of me. I wasn't considered part of the family, so I never received souvenirs. Being treated as defective by my family was hell. I had no friends to talk to and I was lonely. My parents wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible. When I became an adult, they quickly married me off. My parents gave a large sum of money to my husband, Kevin. It was compensation for taking care of a weak, infertile, and defective person like me. Kevin, who was in financial trouble, married me for the substantial financial support. I was a full-time housewife. I was unsure whether Kevin was working or just having fun. However, he always came home late and drunk. Our marriage was based on money from the start, so Kevin never had any affection for me. Be grateful that someone like you, who's useless, even got married. I was repeatedly told the same thing as my parents, that I was useless because I couldn't have children. I still couldn't get pregnant after several years of marriage. However, there was one thing that saved me after getting married. Although Kevin treated me coldly, my father-in-law and brother-in-law and his wife were kind to me. My father-in-law, who'd known me since I married his son at age 20, treated me like his own daughter. My brother-in-law Mike and his wife Maria cared about me, especially Maria, who was worried about me. Ashley, you don't need to be like a doll and do whatever people say. Mike works for a big company and Maria also has a job. She even runs her own interior design office. She's a cheerful and wonderful woman. Maria is also very caring. Knowing that I spent most of my days alone and lonely, she came to check on me. At first, we just had tea and chatted, but eventually she started teaching me various things. Try to get a qualification in something, even if it's just a hobby, she advised me. I told her it was impossible because I hadn't gone to school enough. Seeing that I was down, only able to do basic housework, Maria said, "If you can do basic housework, you can do most things. Learning something new builds confidence." At Maria's suggestion, I started studying for a color certification. I later learned that my father-in-law had consulted with Mike and Maria about me. Ashley tends to underestimate herself. "I wish there was a way to boost her confidence," my father-in-law said. "Introducing her to new areas of study could help," Maria suggested. Mike and my father-in-law agreed with her suggestion. Although my parents used to say that I was weak and slow-witted, I found studying enjoyable. I gained a bit of confidence when I passed a certification exam while studying during my free time. I was happy because I had always thought I couldn't do anything. I wanted to study more and aim for higher levels. However, when I told Kevin, he just scoffed at me. Must be nice to be able to waste time on useless studying. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt by his words. Instead, I felt angry. I finally let out the dark feelings I had kept inside. Are those the words something an unemployed person who relies on money from his wife's family should say? Kevin was taken aback by my sarcasm, as I had always been submissive. He got angry at being confronted with the truth. "Shut up. I'm different from a defective product like you. I'm going to make it big," he shouted. I didn't hold back in my response. "You know, they call people like you big mouths." Furious at my defiance, Kevin kicked the wall and stormed out of the room. He probably went out to drink and have fun to blow off some steam. I understood that my parents wanted to get rid of their troublesome daughter, but I wish they had chosen a better partner for me. However, if they had that kind of mentality, they wouldn't have neglected their weak daughter in the first place. Marrying Kevin was a mistake. I ended up married to a loser who used the money from my family to play around. But ironically, it was Kevin's family that broadened my narrow perspective. After that incident, Kevin didn't come home for several days. I knew he was with my sister Emily, but I didn't do anything about it. Emily had divorced her husband and given up custody of her child. My parents still doted on her. That's why they allowed Kevin and Emily's affair to continue. I could clearly see the intentions of my parents, Emily and Kevin. They were probably planning for Kevin to divorce me if Emily got pregnant. My parents would have preferred to fulfill Emily's wishes over caring about me. I knew that one day my sister would steal my husband. I prepared myself for that day, now confident that I could handle it. Sometime later, we all gathered at my father-in-law's house. I regularly visited him, but Kevin hadn't been to his family home in a while. Kevin had a lot of pride and compared himself to his brother. Mike had graduated from a prestigious university and worked for a large company while Kevin was unemployed. Neither my father-in-law nor Mike had ever pointed this out. But Kevin felt inferior on his own. He hadn't done anything about it himself. He took pride in marrying me, a woman from a wealthy family, but my father-in-law didn't care. My father-in-law doted on me, his daughter-in-law, but was strict with Kevin. Kevin constantly praised Maria, Mike's wife, for being excellent. Deep down, he was jealous that his brother had a beautiful and intelligent wife. "Maria is amazing. She's successful at work, has children, and is a capable woman. Ashley is just stupid and can't do anything," he said with transparent flattery toward Maria and insults toward me. Maria looked annoyed by his words, but she calmly dismissed Kevin's remarks. "Ashley is my sister too. I don't find it amusing when my sister is insulted," Marie replied. Mike nodded in agreement. "Kevin, think about yourself before comparing Maria and Ashley," Mike warned. Kevin clicked his tongue dismissively. I felt embarrassed by Kevin's childish behavior. I understood that he felt inferior to his successful brother, but he needed to grow up. My father-in-law looked at Kevin with bitterness. He had treated them equally, but the siblings had turned out so differently. He had sighed about it to me. But today, my father-in-law cleared his throat and scolded Kevin. "Aren't you ashamed, Kevin? Relying on Ashley's family money and not working? Ashley is a good wife. If you're a husband, support yourself. Don't you understand something so simple?" Kevin's face turned red with anger. "Dad, Ashley was useless and dumped on me. That's why I'm just returning the favor," he retorted. Mike answered on behalf of his father. "Kevin, I don't want to say this as your brother, but your mind is rotten." Usually calm, Mike's sharp words made Kevin curse and storm out. As I tried to stop him, my father-in-law held me back. "I'm sorry, Ashley. I hoped he would become more responsible after getting married, but it seems that's not the case." With their shoulders slumped, Mike and Maria sighed beside my father-in-law. As I quietly bowed my head and tried to leave, Maria stopped me. "Don't worry, Ashley. Everything is prepared." I nodded and left my father-in-law's house, returning to the chaotic home where Kevin was raging. The room was a mess, destroyed by Kevin in a fit of anger. As I stared in disbelief at his childish actions, the drunk Kevin raised his voice. "I'm divorcing you, the infertile one. I'm going to marry your sister." Kevin laughed, bragging that my parents had already given their consent. So Kevin chose Emily after all, I thought. My parents had always given Emily everything she wanted. Even if it was my husband, they didn't mind. Kevin knew I couldn't have children when he married me. It was convenient for him to use me as a wife. However, Emily wanted Kevin, and my parents condoned their affair. They probably wanted grandchildren now. So they would use Emily's pregnancy as an opportunity for her to marry Kevin. It was something my parents were capable of doing. When Emily divorced before, she gave up custody of her child, saying the child wasn't cute because they weren't attached to her. Emily was the type who loved herself more than her own child. I felt sorry for the child Emily and Kevin would have. Would a child born to such selfish parents be happy, I wondered. Kevin, not understanding my concerns, mocked me, telling me to leave because we were divorcing. "I'll pay you alimony, you good-for-nothing." The shameless man didn't even realize that my parents would be the ones providing alimony. I signed the divorce papers, took my essentials, and left the house. Instead of going to my parents' house, I sought refuge at Mike and Maria's. I had been consulting with them about my suspicions about Kevin and Emily's affair. Mike said with a gloomy face, "I wouldn't put it past Kevin." That's when Maria started preparing for the worst-case scenario. Mike and Maria had a young child. When I arrived at their house, their shy child peeked out for a moment before hiding again. He was a cute boy who resembled Maria. According to Mike, his son was extremely shy. Maria, Mike, and I discussed our plans for the future. Maria had already arranged a place for me to live. I would be staying in the company housing of Maria's interior design firm, and I was going to work at Maria's firm. I was anxious about whether I could work, having never worked before. However, Maria assured me with a smile, "Don't worry, Ashley, you can do it." Maria took care of me, and Mike handled the paperwork. I severed ties with my family after the divorce. Mike explained the situation to my former father-in-law and concluded, "Dad, we are cutting ties with Kevin too." My former father-in-law was disheartened but not surprised. He told me to come and visit as usual since Kevin was no longer related to us. That's how I officially divorced and became independent. I received alimony from Kevin and severance money from my parents. I returned the severance money without using a dime. I didn't want to use my parents' money ever again. I started working at Maria's interior design firm. At first, I learned the basics of the job from one of Maria's subordinates. His name was Stephen, a cheerful man around my age. He taught me in between his busy schedule and chatted with me casually. One morning, I was the first to arrive at the office and cleaned it, surprising Stephen. "Wow, the office is spotless." He happily helped me with the cleaning. When I apologized, he tilted his head, puzzled. "I've thought this before, but why do you apologize when you haven't done anything wrong? We're equals. We work together." This was the first time someone told me we were equals. I had always felt inferior because of my weak body and inability to get pregnant. I believed that I was burdening others by living. In reality, the capable Stephen should have been in a higher position. But he laughed it off and said that if we worked together, we were the same. I felt embarrassed by my own self-deprecation, realizing that there were such generous men out there. At that moment, Maria came to work a little early. She looked at Stephen and me, smiling. "Oh, Stephen, did you finally get close to Ashley?" Stephen turned bright red at Maria's words. I didn't understand what she meant until Maria whispered to me, "Stephen wanted to talk to you alone and was waiting for a chance." Stephen blushed and said, Director, we agreed you wouldn't say that," before leaving for the break room. Maria playfully slapped my shoulder as I stood there, dumbfounded. When I finally understood the situation and blushed, Maria said, "Stephen is such a good guy. It seems like he's liked you since you first came into the office. But I'm divorced and I have a flaw." Maria exchanged glances with Stephen, who had prepared a cafe latte for her. Then she patted my bowed head and confessed a shocking truth. The son Maria and Mike were raising wasn't their biological child. In fact, he was a child of Maria's relative. They had taken him in after his parents died in an accident, so he was essentially adopted. Maria and Mike prioritized raising the child who had lost his parents. My former father-in-law knew about it, but Kevin didn't. That's why I didn't know until now. Maria said while looking at Stephen and me, sipping her cafe latte, with a warm and gentle voice, "When our first son called us Dad and Mom, I cried. Having a biological child doesn't automatically make you a good parent. Even with blood ties, there are parents and children like me who ignore each other. But Maria and Mike's son chose his parents of his own accord. I thought that was far more precious than a forced family based on blood ties alone." I took a sip of the cafe latte Stephen had prepared for me. The warm and sweet scent gently relaxed my heart. About 3 years have passed since then. I married Stephen. We got married about a year after we started dating. When I apologized again for being unable to have children, he got upset with me. "You don't need to apologize, Ashley. Would you be happy if I knelt down and apologized for not being able to have children?" I shook my head and he laughed cheerfully. "It's just a minor issue. Don't bow your head for something you don't need to apologize for." He had no idea how much his words saved me. Even after remarrying, I kept in touch with Maria, Mike, and my former father-in-law. All 3 were happy for my successful marriage, and today we were on a short trip. It was a tourist spot that Maria had once told me was fun when she visited with her family. I was sitting in a chair, waiting for my husband. He said he needed to use the restroom, so I was resting at a nearby tea shop. Then suddenly, I heard a voice from behind. "Ashley?" It was Kevin, my ex-husband. Behind him was my sister, Emily. Emily was still beautiful, but her makeup had gotten heavier. "You're still so gloomy. Traveling alone after the divorce?" Since I hadn't told my parents about the remarriage, Emily thought I was single. As I ignored her, my husband returned. "Sorry, Ashley, the restroom was crowded." My husband looked puzzled at Kevin and Emily. He definitely wanted to ask, "Who are these people?" As I tried to ignore them and urged my husband to leave, Emily mocked me. "You found another man already? Even though you're incompetent and can't have kids." As Kevin tried to laugh along, my husband spoke up, looking displeased. "I am Ashley's husband, and her name is now Ashley Stevens. By the way, we do have a child." He patted my belly and Kevin turned pale. Emily sneered. "I bet the baby will be disabled." My husband replied in a cold voice. He was probably at the limit of his patience. "Ashley is currently pregnant with her second child. Her older daughter is 2 years old and healthy. Today, we left her with my parents." Kevin turned pale at my husband's words. I myself was shocked when I first got pregnant. I cried out to the doctor at the maternity clinic, told him I shouldn't be able to have children, but the doctor examined my body and declared I could get pregnant. I had been led to believe by my parents that I couldn't have children. I had taken their word for it since they had always said so. However, my body was actually able to conceive normally. When I told my husband about my pregnancy, he was overjoyed. During my marriage with Kevin, I never got pregnant. I wondered why, so I consulted with Maria. Then she sighed, shook her head, and formed a hypothesis. I never tested myself because of my parents' suggestions. Actually, my parents knew I could get pregnant. Kevin knew too and was using contraception. Maria hesitantly muttered to me, Ashley, there's a possibility that your parents have been deceiving you all along. Probably they didn't want me to have children. They thought it would be a hassle if I, who was frail, gave birth to a child who had disabilities. So they instructed Kevin not to get me pregnant. I remarried and had a healthy baby girl with Stephen. My second child during pregnancy is a boy, and both mother and child are healthy. I had been burdened with an inexplicable sense of guilt due to my terrible parents' scheme. As my husband and I were about to leave, Emily pointed and smirked. I aborted Kevin's child. It was a failure. In other words, she aborted it due to the possibility of disabilities. Kevin desperately begged me, Please give me one of your children. Otherwise, I'll be kicked out. Emily laughed maliciously. I was about to scream in anger, but my husband stopped me. He looked at Kevin and Emily with disgust and said, Save your nonsense for when you're in a coffin, you piece of trash. He gave them a sharp glare, then urged me to leave while holding my hand. I also turned my back on Kevin and Emily, sending them a contemptuous look before walking away. I felt like I had seen something incredibly bad for their unborn child. Later, I safely gave birth to a baby boy. Caring for my 2-year-old daughter and infant son is difficult, but my husband helps me. As for my ex-husband, Kevin, he was eventually abandoned by Emily. My parents were also kicked out once they were no longer needed. According to my ex-father-in-law and Mike, Kevin is in debt and struggling financially. They turned him away when he came asking for help, dumbfounded by his situation. And my selfish parents and sister Emily also ruined themselves. After divorcing Kevin, Emily indulged in affairs with married men and ultimately met her downfall. She was sued multiple times by her lovers' wives and had to pay alimony. In the process, she gradually lost her fortune and credibility with those around her. Even my parents couldn't stop Emily. Finally, due to Emily's selfishness, they lost all of their assets. Moreover, foolish Emily borrowed money from a shady company and is now being chased by a huge debt. My parents and Emily are homeless, but it's not my concern. They are not my family. They are just blood-related strangers. My precious family consists of my kind husband and 2 beautiful children. It doesn't matter what happened to my parents, Emily and Kevin. As I changed my son's diaper, my husband played with my daughter, laughing. Seeing his smile, I truly felt grateful to have met him. I smiled while watching them, and my husband looked puzzled. What's wrong, Ashley? I'm just so happy to be married to you, Stephen. He playfully replied while patting our daughter. Well, you're Mrs. Stephen, too. His cheerful laughter made me and our children break into smiles as well.